The story of Christianity in 5 minutes or less. The story of Christianity begins, of course, with Jesus Christ, from whom Christianity gets its name. After Jesus' resurrection from the dead, he sent his followers to spread the news of salvation across the world. His followers began in Jerusalem, but quickly spread out to the surrounding cities and nations. The popularity of Christianity exploded in the first 100 years after Jesus' return to heaven. Preachers such as Paul the Apostle traveled throughout the Roman Empire, spreading the word everywhere they went. Churches and gathering places for Christians sprang up in nearly every town. At first, these early Christians thought that Jesus would come back within their lifetimes, but as the original disciples grew old and began to pass away, they realized that they needed to prepare for a longer stay on earth, just in case. They began to establish more permanent, more connected churches with greater structure and official leaders. As Christianity spread throughout the land, Jews began to persecute Christians as liars and false teachers. Before this persecution, Christianity had generally been considered a part of Jewish beliefs. Now, Christianity began to be thought of as a religion of its own. Christianity expanded so fast that Roman authorities grew afraid of it. When a large section of Rome burned to the ground in AD 64, Emperor Nero blamed the Christians and made Christianity illegal in the Roman Empire. This began a massive, terrible persecution of Christians that lasted for over 200 years. Christians were forced to meet in secret under threat of torture and death. Finally, in 306 AD, Emperor Constantine came to power. Constantine claimed to have undergone a conversion to Christianity. In 313 AD, he issued the Edict of Milan, which made Christianity legal again and ended the persecution in the Roman Empire. Eventually, Christianity even became the official religion of the Roman Empire. Constantine ushered in a new phase of Christianity. Following the Edict of Milan, Christianity became popular. Christians such as Jerome, Ambrose, and Augustine became the great thinkers of the world. The churches, which had lost contact with each other during the persecution, held several important councils in which they established key points of Christianity. These councils established the list of books we now consider the Bible, threw out several false ideas that arose, and made compromises between arguing churches. However, during the last of these councils, it became clear that there were major differences between churches in the East and churches in the West. The West had established a formal structure of church government including deacons, priests, bishops, archbishops, cardinals, and at the very top of the church, the Pope. The East, on the other hand, disliked having one man over the whole church. The problems grew until finally, in 1054 AD, the church split in two, with the Roman Catholic Church in the West and the Eastern Orthodox Church in the East. The Roman Catholic Church grew larger and larger over the next several centuries. As it did, several questionable teachings became part of the church. Some men began to protest against these practices, earning the name Protestants. Some of the most important Protestants were Erasmus, Ulrich Zwingli, and John Calvin, but the most important Protestant was Martin Luther. Luther was a Catholic priest, but he became so upset at the problems in the church that he rejected the Catholic Church altogether and began a whole new type of church. So, after splitting into the Eastern Orthodox Church and the Roman Catholic Church, Christianity split again when the Protestant Church broke off. After this split, Europe went through several centuries of war between Catholics and Protestants. The Protestant Church never formed one large leadership structure like the Catholics did, but instead remained a lot of smaller pieces. When the Americas were discovered, Catholics and Protestant countries began to compete for control of the new lands, sending missionaries along with explorers and conquerors. Catholics were the first to arrive in much of South and Central America, while North America was mostly settled by Protestants. North American colonies looked very attractive to Protestants, who were being persecuted in their home countries. Large numbers of Protestants traveled the ocean to set up colonies where they could freely practice their own religions. These colonies grew large and gradually grew angry at the oppressive countries from which they had come, such as England. Eventually, they declared their independence, and after a period of war, they founded a country known as the United States of America. After the Americas were established, countries began sending missionaries all over the world, including China, Japan, India, and especially Africa. The good news of Christianity has reached all the way around the globe, though with varying levels of success. Today, about 2.1 billion people claim to be Christians, about 30% of everyone in the world. And all this took place in just over 2,000 years, starting with one very unique person, Jesus.
Islam in the Philippines. Islam was first brought over to the Philippines by Arab Muslim traders in the late 13th and early 14th centuries. These merchants came from present-day Malaysia and Indonesia to the Sulu Island and Mindanao in the Philippines. At the time, the inhabitants lived in autonomous small communities spread around the many thousands of islands. The indigenous population quickly embraced Islam, building to the Philippines' first mosque in the town of Simunul in the 14th. The Muslim settler didn't just bring architecture but also brought their culture, values, and system. 50 years later, Islamic influence rapidly ascended northward, reaching as far as Manila on its island of Luzon. When the Spanish first arrived in the mid-15th, they were dismayed to find such a strong Muslim presence. They had, after all, only recently expelled the Moors from Spain after nearly 800 years of conflict. The Spanish nicknamed the Muslim inhabitants as the Moros, the corruption of the word Moors. The Spanish quickly converted much of the Philippines to Christianity, using this word quite liberally. Spain was struggling to push south as the Moros fiercely resisted the Spanish attempts on dominance over Sulu and Mindanao. It was not until the mid-80s that advanced military technology began to tip the scales in favor of the Spain. However, locals' resistance to this matter still cropped up on occasion. Were it not for the Spanish colonization of the Philippines for 333 years, the country would have been a Muslim state like its Southeast Asian neighbors, John Lilliputian, and the United States took control of the Philippines after the Spanish-American War in 1898. The Moros viewed the new colonialists as no less objectionable than the Spanish. They fiercely resisted attempts to westernize Mindanao in particular. The U.S. military even had no invent a new, more powerful handgun, the called M1911, in order to stop the Moro. The latest wave of Muslim separation in the nation's south began in the 1970s. Since the country became independent, the Filipino government has encouraged non-Muslims to move through the Mindanao. The Muslim view this policy as designed to de-Islamize the region and believe the Christian treat them as second-class citizens.
The first of the 9 beliefs of Hinduism covers the Supreme Being, or God. Hindus believe in a one, all-pervasive Supreme Being who is both eminent and transcendent, both creator and unmanifest reality. Contrary to prevailing misconceptions, Hindus all worship a one Supreme Being, though by different names. This is because the peoples of India, with different languages and cultures, have understood the Supreme Being in their own distinct way. Through history, there arose 4 principal Hindu denominations: Saivism, Shaktism, Vaishnavism, and Smartism, also known as Shanmatam. Each of the 4 denominations has a different name and concept for the Supreme Being. For Saivites, God is Shiva. For Shaktas, Goddess Shakti is supreme. For Vaishnavites, Lord Vishnu is God. For Smartas, all deities are reflections of the one God. In the Smarta denomination, the choice of deity is left to the devotee. 6 deities are commonly chosen from: Shiva, Shakti, Ganesha, Vishnu, Kumara, and Surya. This liberal Smarta perspective is well known, but is not the prevailing Hindu view. The fact that Hindus of various sects may call the one supreme God by many different names according to their denomination or regional tradition can be a source of confusion. Truth for the Hindu has many names, but that does not make for many truths. Hinduism gives us the freedom to approach God in our own way, encouraging a multiplicity of paths, not asking for conformity to just one. A second source of confusion can be the fact that Hindus also believe in many gods who perform various functions. They are like executives in a large corporation. They should not be confused with the Supreme God. These divinities are highly advanced beings who have specific duties and powers, not unlike the heavenly spirits, overlords, or archangels revered in other faiths. Each denomination worships a Supreme God and its own pantheon, or parivar, of divine beings. Explanatory material on Hinduism's core beliefs is drawn from other sections of What is Hinduism, primarily Chapter 1, Hinduism, the Greatest Religion in the World, and Chapter 12, 10 Questions People Ask About Hinduism.